Hi, good evening. Welcome to Read with Chide. Welcome to day 21. And we are finally done with Genesis and we are in Exodus. I don't think you can see this yet. You can see Exodus chapter 1. That's where we are today. And I'm super excited. We have entered our third chapter because we've been reading Genesis and Matthew simultaneously. Now we've finished with Genesis and we're entering into Exodus. I think I'll do a separate video to talk about Genesis in general, right? Genesis, what I learned from Genesis and the things that stood out for me. I was taking notes. I hope you were taking notes too, because the overriding point in reading the Bible end to end is seeing Christ in the Bible, right? Seeing him seeing the Old Testament talk about what Christ will do, and the New Testament talking about what Christ has done and who we are in Christ as believers. But also, there is a part where you get to see these Bible characters beyond just Bible characters, and see yourself in their stories and see what faith looks like for them and all of that. So, yeah, I'm going to share the things that I learned from reading Genesis in a separate video. And hi, Christiana. And I would hope that you would, share your comments on that and tell me what you also learned from reading Genesis together. Getting right into it, welcome again to day 21 as we start with the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 1. As you can see, my voice is coming back little by little. We're almost there. Verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all their generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Remember, there were migrants into Egypt. They had come from Canaan into Egypt during the famine, and because Joseph, their brother, was, in charge, they were given the land of Goshen to live there, prosper there, right? And now the Bible is telling us they had multiplied, they had increased greatly, and they were everywhere. Verse 8. Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, lest they multiply, and it come to pass, falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Now, I can't help but think when I read this part, is it possible that, afflicting them with, all this work, putting taskmasters over them and making them slaves was actually a ploy to get them to run away from Egypt? Because read again verse 10. It says, Come on, let us deal wisely with them, let them multiply, and come to pass when they falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies. And he said, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So is it possible that the initial point was to frustrate them out? And when they did not go, they stayed and worked as slaves. The Egyptians got used to having them as slaves because who doesn't like free labor, right? And then by the time God sent Moses for them, the Egyptians were used to having free labor. And Moses was coming to say, Let my people go. When they've already tasted free labor, when they've already tasted having slaves, of course it was hard to let them go at that time. But I'm going to go and do, some more study on it. But I can't help but wonder, Is it possible that the plan was actually to frustrate them out, not originally to keep them as slaves for all those years? Hmm. Let me read what I'm saying. So I'm using a study Bible. This is a Spurgeon study Bible. So interesting enough, there's a commentary on verse 10, that very verse. And it's saying here, the land of Goshen was fruitful, and the Israelites had been greatly favored by the Egyptian king. The mass of them, therefore, had little thought of ever leaving the country. They resolved that they would settle there permanently. In fact, though God will not have it so, they became Egyptians as much as they could. They were part of the Egyptian nation, and they began to forget their separate origin. In all probability, if they had been left to themselves, they would have melted and been absorbed into Egyptian race and lost their identity as God's special people. To a large degree, they began to adopt the superstitions, idolatries, and iniquities of Egypt. There's no doubt about that. When you read about what they did in the wilderness with Moses, what the kind of things they were saying to Moses, when any little thing come up, oh, why didn't you know that they saw themselves already as Egyptians? It says here, and these things clung to them in later years, yet all the while God was resolved to bring them out of that evil connection. They must be separated people. There must be a separated people. They could not be Egyptians nor live permanently like Egyptians, for God had chosen them for himself, and he meant to make an abiding difference between Israel and Egypt. The first thing to be done with the Israelites was to cause them to be anxious to come out of Egypt, for it is not God's way to make people his servants, except so far as they willingly yield themselves to him. He never violates the human will, though he constantly and effectually influences it. God will not have the people dragged out of Egypt or driven out in chains against their own glad consent. He must bring them out in such a way that they will be willing to come out so that they will march forth. So he doesn't say anything here about what I noticed in verse 10 particularly, but was saying how they had melted into Egypt. Okay, let's read on. Verse 12. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake unto the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other was Puah. And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? But the midwives feared God, and sorry, and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered and are delivered and are delivered. What am I saying? The Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives fear God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. Now, before, for the longest time, everybody said, oh, may you give birth like the Hebrew women, but note the Hebrew midwives were actually not telling the truth, right? They lied in order to save the children because they feared God. They could not bear to kill the children, right? So therefore they lied. So yeah, before you say you shall give birth easily like the Hebrew women, have that in mind. If you give me 1 second, I need to make an adjustment. And I am back. Okay, so now Pharaoh has given an order for the Egyptian people to kill Hebrew children, Hebrew sons. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife to and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's bank. See how innovative that was. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." And then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take the child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it. So she took the initiative, took did the brave thing to save her child rather than allow them kill the child. And not only was the child saved, she got the chance to raise her child by herself. Not only did she get the chance to raise her child by herself, she was paid by Pharaoh's daughter to do it. I'm sure that was no small wage. Verse 10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of water." And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way. When he saw there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to them, and he said to him that did the wrong, "Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow?" And he said, "Who made thee prince over us and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killed the Egyptian?" And Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." And now Pharaoh heard this thing, and he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. He showed kindness. And when they came to Ruel, their father, he said, "How is it that you have come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock." And he said unto his daughters, "And where is he? Why is he? Why is it that he have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." Because obviously, an Egyptian in the land of Midian, he's far from home, right? He must be sojourning. Call him, let him eat bread. Verse 21. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." And it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob, and God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain to God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land unto a good land and a large, the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come up unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Now come, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee, and that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and they shall say unto them, the God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. And they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? Now, a little context. Moses was not scared for nothing. Pharaoh was in the class of a god. Remember, Moses was born in Egypt. All he knew was the Egyptian lifestyle, right? Remember, the Israelites had, blended into Egypt. All Moses knew was the Egyptian lifestyle. So Pharaoh was God level to him. Pharaoh was not just another king. Pharaoh was regarded as a god. So you're telling me to go to this land where Pharaoh has had these people as slaves for all my life. Like, Moses was born into an era where the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. These people have been slaves all my life. And you're telling me to go before the Pharaoh and tell him to let his slaves go for free without an army to, fight him and get these people out, without you're telling me to just go and tell him to let his people go, let your people go. And now he's talking about the Israelites. Now they will ask me, who is this God of our fathers you say is asking you to bring us out? What's his name? You would think that if you go to slaves and tell them, I have come to save you, they'll be like, oh, thank you, let's go. But he's saying they will ask me, because he knows these people, they are hard-hearted. They are hard-hearted. They will ask me, who is this guy? What's his name? This God that sent you? Because they were living in Egypt. They knew several gods. They were worshiping several gods in Egypt. Yes. Israelites had blended into Egypt so much that they were worshiping all these gods in Egypt. Because imagine how many generations had been born in Egypt and they didn't know any other God but the gods of Egypt. So if you're coming to tell them there's a God, that is the God of their father, the God of their fathers had asked you to come and bring them out, they'll ask you, what's his name? They know the names of the gods that they worship in God. Verse 14. And I am that I am. And he said, thus shall the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say unto them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt unto the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, and they shall hearken to thy voice, and thou shalt come, thou and the elders of Israel, unto the king of Egypt, and ye shall say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews hath met with us, and now let us go, we beseech thee, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. And I am sure the king of Egypt will not let you go, no, not by a mighty hand. And I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in the midst thereof. And after that he will let you go. And I will give these people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall come to pass that when ye go, ye shall not go empty, but every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, and of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold, and raiment, and ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and ye shall spoil the Egyptians. This was God's plan for them to leave Egypt not empty handed, but with goods from Egypt. And that is Exodus chapter 3. We are moving on to Matthew chapter 14. But before we go, I still can't get my mind off Exodus chapter 1, verse 10. So I'm just going to use um the Bible on my phone, my Bible app, to look at Exodus chapter 1, verse 10 in other translations. Let's first of all look at it in NLT. Probably it will give us a bit more context. So in NLT, it says we must make a plan, blah, blah, blah. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country. Oh, okay, that was him saying they will escape. Oh, I get it now. So he wasn't saying that they should get them out of the country. He was saying that they will join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them out of the land. Okay, if we allow them to keep multiplying like this, they will join forces with our enemies, fight against us, and so get themselves out of the land. So the whole idea was to keep them in Egypt from the get-go. Okay, makes sense. Okay, up to Matthew chapter 14 now. Matthew chapter 14. Also, before you know it, we'll be done with Matthew. Matthew has what? 28 chapters, I think. 28 chapters. But we are in chapter 14 now. Matthew chapter 14, verse 1. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus, and said unto his servants, this is John the Baptist. He is risen from the dead, and therefore mighty works do show forth themselves in him. Now, if not that the man was being eaten by guilty conscience, you killed a full-grown John the Baptist, who was less than a year older than Jesus. If you remember, Elizabeth was pregnant, and then Mary got pregnant, and Mary came to Elizabeth to visit her, and Elizabeth, the baby in Elizabeth's womb, leapt, and rejoiced in the womb. So John the Baptist was less than a year older than Jesus, and you beheaded John the Baptist. And this is a whole different human being, full grown man, of 30 at the very least, because Jesus started his ministry at the age of 30. And you thought this was John the Baptist come back to life in another man's body? Really? Another man that was, anyway. And said unto his servants, this is John the Baptist, he is risen from the dead, therefore mighty works do show themselves in him. For Herod had laid hold on John and bound him and put him in prison for Herodias' sake, his brother Philip's wife. For John said unto him, it is not lawful for thee to have her. And when he would have put him to death, he feared the multitude, because they counted him as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias danced before them, and pleased Herod, whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. And she, being instructed by her mother, said, give me here John the Baptist's head in a charger. And the king was sorry. Nevertheless, for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat, he commanded it to be given to her. And he sent and beheaded John in the prison, and his head was brought in a charger and given to the damsel, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took up the body and buried it, and went and told Jesus. When Jesus heard of it, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and was moved with compassion towards them, and healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, this is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy them and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, they need not depart, give ye them to eat. I'm sure the disciples were like, oh, give ye them what to eat? We just explained to you that we are in a desert place, and so we should let them go to the villages. It's easier for each man to sort himself than for us to think of sorting all these people. Verse 17, and they said unto him, we have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled, and they took up the fragments that remained, 12 baskets full. Now I'm underlining, or rather highlighting, the part where it says, and he gave thanks. He blessed and brake and gave the loaves. Verse 21, and they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. And if we go with, how things are in today's church, there were probably more women than men. But again, this was Bible times. Maybe there were more men following Jesus for the word than women. Verse 22, and straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship, and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. I think Jesus speaking and they could hear him was another miracle here, because Jesus was still on the sea, right? It says here that the wind was contrary, so it was not a quiet night on a silent sea. No, the wind was contrary. Jesus was still out at sea, because if you remember, eventually Peter will say, if it is you, ask me to come out and meet you, right? So he spoke, and he told them, be not afraid. Verse 28, and Peter answered him and said, Lord, If it be thou, bid me to come out unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore did thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. And when they were gone over, they came on into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all the country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole. This is one thing Jesus said time at least two times that I recall, how he saw such great faith from people who were not Jews, right? Remember the Syrophoenician woman. Remember the what's his name? The man that said, I am a man under authority, the centurion, right? These are people who Jesus said, I have not found such great faith in Israel. So these people showed great faith as well. They heard about him and then they sent, oh yeah, go and bring every sick person you know. Jesus has come, healing has come. Let's gather and receive our healing. Even if it is to touch the hem of his garment, we know once we touch him, we'll be made whole. And they were all made perfectly whole. May God bless the reading of his word. Tell me, share with me what stood out to you today, what caught your attention, what were you reminded of, what did you see afresh today, what did you see anew today, what called out to you as we read together. Please let me know in the comments, and do well to share the link with as many people as you can. Share it on your WhatsApp status, share it on your Instagram, share it on your Facebook, share it everywhere you have people following you, and let others join us as we read the Bible together. This was day 21. Join me tomorrow for day 22 as we read the Bible together. Thank you, Christiana, for joining. Thank you, everyone else who joined and did not comment. I do not know your names, but I saw you joining here in the viewer count. So do well to share, please. And if you're watching this as a replay, thank you for joining as well. Please go ahead and share this replay so that everyone can read, as many people as are within your circle can read the Bible with us, and the comments can become more lively as more of us interact and share what is standing out to us as we read. Do have a lovely night rest if you're watching from my time zone, or have a lovely day if you're watching at a time when it's daytime, or whenever else, or whatever other time zone. Hi, Kimifuna. Thank you for joining us. Please join us tomorrow as well, and bring as many friends as you can with you. Do well to subscribe and click on the notification button so that you'll be reminded or notified every time that we are live. Have a lovely, lovely night rest. Good night.